Welcome, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you on the stage. We've been hearing through the day about co-ops and co-op tech. I think it's a good way to end the day with talking a little bit more in detail about what it means to design co-op tech. And all of you have engaged with that question in various ways, which makes for an engaging session because they're very different models or different questions that you all are attempting to answer. So we'll just take it one at a time. The reason I was missing was because the order I have in my phone, so I'll just rely on Janjita to project. And I'm sorry about this, but whatever is the first presentation, we just go with and you just start because I've misplaced my phone. Apologies.
Sorry, just want to know if you have the clicker with you.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Great. So then I can just do it.
Today, I want to share a little bit of our last 12 years of journey at interpreting cooperative principles, weaving those principles into software. And then I have a recruitment proposal for all of you, which I'll talk about. So a little bit about the organization. So we are 12 years old, build platforms that serve collectives in the area of agriculture, so smallholder farmers, farmer organization, waste picker collectives, teacher, principal, parent, not collectives, but groups and so on and so forth. We have about 6.5 million users, and it's largely user paid at the rate of about 1 cent per user per month, and that pays the bill, including maintenance, including innovation and everything. And so realize that many people were earlier talking about funding such infrastructure, that something as little as 1 cent per member per month can actually pay the bill to really world-class infrastructure for cooperatives. So when we started out to design, these are familiar principles to all of you. I'd like to just illustrate examples, right? So as a cooperative, perhaps you want to make sure that your software, your platform supports the principles your collective runs by. In that, there are two things to consider. So I'll kind of just start sharing some design principles we've used, right? So one set of principles will be whether you are able to do your internal operations that align to these. And second set of considerations for you is the relationship between you and perhaps a third-party platform. So whether you are able to do justice to yourself and your members, and whether you are able to have a equitable relationship with a third-party platform. So tomorrow, if Ken were to integrate his platform with ONDC, and so were Uber were to integrate with ONDC, what would that mean? What the power play would be, and all of those. So around that, let's take this taxi driver example only. So with that, I want to talk about a particular point around public versus commons. We haven't spoken much about that while we've spoken about other principles. So you have private ownership of software, you have open source, it's free for everyone. You have DPI, so government built so-called public infrastructure. And then there's a space out there, which I call the digital commons goods or the digital commons infrastructure. So take the example of driver co-op. Now it runs in New York and Ken wants to take it to Chicago. So what would be the way to do it? Imagine there's a Chicago Taxi Union Association, taxi driver union. So will they become a customer to Ken's company? That doesn't seem right. Will they join? Will they become shareholders in the company? Maybe technically possible. But what happens to all the New York drivers who took the initial risk at investing in the company? Not fair to them. And tomorrow, if there is a Trivandrum Taxi Association, it may not even be legally possible for them to become shareholders of his company. So that's out. Will he make it open source? Doesn't feel right. There might be yet another VC-funded startup that just downloads it and starts getting into that business. So can we then imagine a fourth way where it is not open source but common sourced? It could be free, it could be on payment. But this software is only accessible to member-owned organizations. Right? So that's the definition of common source. So early on, we realized that you can create a lot of value using software, but then for that value capture to happen for its members, you weave in these principles. I don't know, clicker, which way to point? Okay. So we early on we started, whenever we would have a user when we built the software, we started putting these terms in our contracts with them, that data belongs to the member, aggregate data also belongs to the collective. Right? So a lot of the realization you do is that while individual data has value, aggregate data has more value, and today platform sucks it out, and so on. Soon we started seeing interest from state government. So 3 different states in the country signed up to work with smallholder farmers and say, can we get the platform? We said, yeah, it's a good to be used, because one of the intentions also is for the state to adopt these platforms and use public money to really add resources to the platform. I'll talk about it in a minute. But then how do you distribute that to the state? So we created a license called Platform Commons License. And perhaps first of its kind that really talks about which really is hinged around the commons, the cooperative principles. So we created a platform commons license and start giving it out to different states. Uses the platform for working with over 2 million farmers. And to those farmers, so all the cost of onboarding, training those farmers is borne by the state. They've also brought in a lot of resources, buyers, sellers, suppliers, content, and all of that is now available under Creative Commons to any other instance of that platform that's connected on that platform network. Very often we've also found that the users of such resources are different from a different organization than the organization that got them in the first place. So very really great usage of such shared users. The only thing common in all of this is that all the users are collectives themselves. So there's no private for-profit user. It's been quite a time since we wrote the PCL, and here's my proposition to all of you. A lot of new things have come. Earlier, Kiran spoke about partner agreement. And I'll borrow a little bit from Gayathri's time. So Kiran spoke about partner agreement. You really don't need to register anything. So can we create a virtual cooperative? Right? Just people who come across do a digital contract on the platform and start operating it. Protocols, networks, things like that have started becoming, which were not visualized earlier. So here is the request to all of you and to your other friends. We believe it's time to write Platform Commons License 2.0. And I think we also have matured over time. And I don't want to do it sitting in my own company. We did version 1 like that, but I think version 2, we can use collective knowledge and write a richer license. So, please reach out to me and show your interest. The other thing we want to take it from there is once we author license 2.0, is to start creating a global repository of software which is meant for commons. So whichever of us who's built software is willing to give it to member-owned organizations should start putting our software there. It could be free. For example, we'll make it available free. Depending on who's invested, how they can have their own model. So very much like open source, the same principles, but common source, only available to people who are member-owned. So that's my request to you. Join hands and let's take this forward in terms of what could be the beginning of digital commons infrastructure, standing next to digital public infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashant. And please find him at the conference to show your interest. Could we move on to Suroto from INKUR?
Hello, everyone. My name is Suroto from Indonesia, and I'm working for National Federation of People-Based Cooperative Enterprises. And we call INKUR in Bahasa, in Indonesian language. I just proposed this idea to the federations, and the idea is a point of dividend deal. The basic difference between cooperative and corporation is in the decision making, right? And then decision making process, and then point of dividend deals, and the basic difference between cooperative and corporation is in the decision making process, and cooperative adheres to one person one food system that we have talked about that in the early morning. While the capitalist corporation use a one share one food system, and those who control the majority share are the one who determine decisions. And apart from this difference, cooperative and corporations, use enterprise to answer the pragmatic daily needs. And the most basic difference is in the goals and also the way to share the economic benefit. And the way capitalist corporations share profits is based on how much they invest, and the goal is to pursue as a large of. Meanwhile, the cooperative share economic added value according to participation based not only on the amount of capital but also transactions, such as model of buying more and getting more result, and like such as the Dive model, which was initiated from the start of Rockdale pioneers. And based on this system of sharing the value of economic benefit, cooperatives can determine the value of benefit point from the cooperative, either based on the capital participation transaction or economic activities with the cooperative year. And then based on this, cooperatives can form a system to transact their point in the system, and digital technology can help make this process easier under the name. And some important reasons is a member who have carried out transaction in their cooperative and they want to value an economic benefit compared to transaction in capitalist corporation to be redistributed in the form of the point value. And this points value can be transacted between members during the current years during the cash need. When the member they want cash in the present and not in the future, and they can transact that point. That point means the value of the dividends in the future. Point may be worth more or less at the end of the year, and the pricing really depend on the agreement between the buyer and seller members. Yeah, and the description of the system is from the net profit and profit distributed to member after deducting share for fund and reserve fund and so on, and then are divided based on the certain percentage based on capital participation and individual member activities. It's like how to divide it in the dividend policies and the cooperative. And then the last, the main requirement of must of course be based not only absolute implementation of cooperative principle, but also on greater responsibility towards its member in participation. As we know that co-op is not why all people that co-op is not real co-op, because the members participation sometimes is just like like consumers. It's not owners. That's why we should be put in the technology system, and then all of people they would like to interact the co-op.
Thank you, Suroto. And I think you made that very important point that simply the implementation of cooperative principles is not enough, and especially when co-ops scale, we sometimes see that responsibility towards the members also needs to remain. Thank you for your presentation, and we move on to Prerak.
Hi everyone, I'm Prerak and I represent the organization called Vrutti, and we have been working in this livelihood space for close to 20 years right now. And the larger focus for me today will be understanding how the platform that we have been co-creating with Prashant has been implemented with, let's say, close to 5,000 farmers, and right now it has been scaled to 20,000 farmers. And what are the learnings that we are deriving, right? And in terms of understanding, while we have understood the platform works on the ground, how do we take it forward when there is a lot of interest from the ecosystem? Then there is a lot of interest from the government, right? There are different stakeholders who wants to be part of the journey. But how do we sort of take it forward? There are certain questions that we have been pondering over, and we felt that I think this will be the right space where we can put them across and understand what entire ecosystem can contribute towards. So I'll go to the quickly sort of talking about the, okay, next slide. So this is just an overview about the work that we have been doing, and largely when we say about that we have reached this many people, our intervention focuses on the bundle of services that we provide following the market-based approach. I think next slide. Yeah. So what happens a lot of time when we sort of execute our intervention in the market-based approach, by very nature of the market itself is incentivizes certain type of behavior, right? Where the digital divide or any type of divide will increase, and probably market will tilt towards the probably larger farmers, or probably more capitalistic, or probably where more value is being generated, right? So in that scenario, the smallholder farmers or the marginalized communities who do not have access to resources gets left out. So our larger focus has been working with the smallholder and marginalized communities across multiple states. And the experience that we have been having is even in specifically with women farmers in Tamil Nadu. So the work that we have been doing is largely focusing on there and trying to understand from the communities as well, whether the platform like this or digital economy, when they become part of that, how would it sort of fare for them, right? So that is the overall experience that I'm going to share next. So this is just about what we work towards. So we can go to the next slide. And what has happened that while providing the market-based approaches, we realize that there is a bundle of services that is required. Now, all of these services is something that we have been providing for last 7-8 years to these farmers. But over the last 2 years specifically, we have been trying to offer these services through a digital platform, which we have been calling as a commons.farm, right? So that is the platform that we have sort of co-created with Prashant and trying to understand how do we offer each of these services to the farmers so they are able to play that role in the digital economy better. Now, there are certain principles that we have been trying to follow while developing this platform itself, right? Because a lot of time while we want to sort of onboard farmers, again, it might create the same issues that might happen in the offline world, right? So how do we ensure that the certain principles about cooperative and all of that gets followed? So initially, while I have put the platform co-op, I mean, there was a revised version where I had question mark that co-op as a word as well, right? Because the platform has been designed, it has been implemented. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, next slide. Yeah. So while we have designed this entire platform, and there has been a lot of stakeholders who have co-created over a period of time. So there are frontline workers who have sort of helped us in co-creating, understanding different use cases. There is government who has been involved. There are philanthropic people who have been involved in all of that, right? So eventually the platform is ready right now. We have sort of experienced the use cases of that in different contexts across 5 states. But how do we take that forward? So when we look back all the principles that we were reflecting upon on the cooperative specifically, probably most of them would sort of we have been trying to follow. But there are critical two principles, which is about the democratic member control and autonomy and independence. That is something we have been questioning on how do we bring them into the platform which is already being in place, right? Because if you need to move forward from, let's say, one resource institution like Vrutti to other 100 resource institution, everyone would like to be part of that journey. And specifically, what we have realized that the intention was to offer this entire platform at the farmer level. But a lot of time, since the maturity, the digital literacy on the ground becomes a barrier towards that. So we generally offer this platform through the resource institution or the frontline workers, and that is the model that we have been following in the implementation across these 5 states. So there are this question that we have been sort of thinking, while intention was that to create the platform at the farmer level, should we come up with a model which sort of stops at the, let's say, collective institution level, which is their own collective, right? Should they be the one who will be making decisions towards, okay, what should be the prices of the produce they're procuring or selling, right? So currently also the platform offers that, where FPO on behalf of farmers decide the price at which the procurement will happen or the sale will happen. So should we come up with a certain these protocols or the principles and define the future of this entire platform to understand how do we scale this? Because eventually it may happen that, again, when we take it to the another scale, who should take the decisions about the prices, who should take the decisions about who should be the part of this platform, right? Because there are multiple stakeholders like government, again the civil society organization, the private players, because there will be buyer, seller, everyone coming into the platform, right? So how does that going forward look like? So that's why the whatever Prashant was sort of looking forward to, that should we create a new license, because this is again depending on that particular license we have co-created in the last 6-7 years. But going forward, should we come up with a new version of the license that guide us on going forward on how does this platform evolve over a period of time? How does the data sharing happens? How does the decision making control happens, and all of that put together, right? So that is the largely the idea, and we have been sort of implementing. We'll continue to implement, come up with new innovations that might help us in understanding what works in what sort of context. But following the cooperative principle has been the backbone for us. But there are certain things that we have been getting challenged over. So we like to understand that. And I think one of the questions that, sir, we were discussing during the community lab as well, that there are certain ground realities which makes it very difficult to even execute, right? While we say that platform exists, but for platform to go from platform to co-op, it's again a difficult challenge, because while platform exists, how do we come up with the architecture which might facilitate this cooperative structure itself, right? So these are some of the challenges. So I'll close it with saying that, I mean, these are some just number about saying that where we have implemented, we have been able to facilitate market transactions close to 100 million rupees in this farmer level. And eventually certain, I mean, the community has already told us that this sort of platform would help them. But when we close it, how do we govern that? So yeah, this was the last slide that I wanted to leave with. Well, the entire experience has been positive over a period of time. It has been iterative. But when we go and scale it to the larger entire ecosystem and probably create a digital commons good, how does it get governed, specifically in the product-based scenario where, let's say now ONDC is coming up, because there is accountability lying on the platform side, there is ownership lying on the product side, right? So how do we govern some of these things? So that's the point of view that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Prerak, and thank you for putting out those questions to the audience. And maybe today or during tomorrow's community lab, it would be great if you could also engage with that question. And I pass it on to Felix now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, wonderful. So I want to start off from the last question of this morning's discussion. How can the global transition look like? What's the strategy? And propose that a part of the strategy, at least, could be leveraging generative AI and everything that comes with it. And this is because I believe one part of the strategy can be the sixth principle of intercooperation, so really cooperating amongst co-ops, and maybe even enlarging this to other movements and other transition fighters, if you want to call them like that. So the open source movement, but others as well. Because I believe there's enormous potential, and I mean, a lot of people will tell this, but there is transformative potential in AI, and in particular now the generative AI that's so prominent right now. And it can be for good and for worse, and I think there's now the chance to make it for good and to use it in particular also for forwarding cooperatives. So I wanted to ask first, who in this room has been using AI? Yeah, I guess it should be all, because if you use a mobile phone, you use AI. And then I wanted to ask, who has been using a tool like ChatGPT or Midjourney or any other generative AI tool? Yeah, probably also very many. So these tools are there now. Yeah, I just wanted to show once more how quick AI is evolving. So just using OpenAI as an example, how when they were releasing their GPT models, and you can see that right now they're almost at a pace where every year there's a new iteration. And next slide, please. Oops. Okay, so on this one, you can see the number of parameters that are in each model, and you can see they increase by tenfold, about 10 times. And if you see that there's an increase of about 10 times each year, and it's not exactly the same as capacity, but it's related to capacity. So AI is advancing at enormous speed, and we can't really estimate where it's going, but it's definitely advancing. And that means the tools we're using today are not the tools we're going to be using in 1 year. And so even if you're disappointed what it can do today, it might be that we are absolutely overwhelmed by what they can do in 1 year. So this is why I believe we need to prepare now and become experts in AI now. Next slide, please. Oh yeah. So I tried to make a table, and I won't go through everything there, but just to show a little bit what kind of use in a simplified way one can do with a co-op. So you can start off just using ChatGPT. And I'm using OpenAI as an example. Of course, you can also use other models, but yeah, here I use ChatGPT. And now, since beginning of November, you can also use their GPTs, which is an easy way of, to some extent, fine-tuning these assistants. And that's already quite a step forward. And then this whole table is about customizing these models more so that they become more professional, more experts in the tasks that you want to make them do. So you can fine-tune, for example, GPT-4. You can develop the diversity of apps through the APIs. And then I'd say the next level is self-hosting your own open source models, either in the cloud or even on your local service. And each step gets a little bit more difficult technically, and comes with different costs. So then there's the last point which I'm putting there, and this is actually the point I want to make, that if we start collectively hosting and adapting and customizing open source models, we have a chance of creating models that are available just to us as a co-op movement, and at the same time can come to us at lower prices, and for the individual co-op also in terms of usage and well, the difficulty for you to use it can be actually much easier than if you try yourself to fine-tune a model or to install your local installation of an open source model. Yeah, this is the point I wanted to make. So the proposal that we are making with Cozy AI is that we develop our own specialized apps according to needs of co-ops, and maybe we can here use the platform co-ops license. I mean, that's maybe an interesting intercooperation there. We can start fine-tuning models with data from co-ops. For this, we can start creating cooperative data sets, local data sets that are only and uniquely available to co-ops, to our common pool. And this, I think, is a chance that maybe was never there to this extent in history of creating a business advantage for co-ops that can't be copied and that can't be stolen by big tech or anyone else by corporate models or corporate companies. Yeah, maybe the next step can then be to have our own data centers and server farms and so on. Even at some point developing our own base models. I mean, that's going to be the next step, but there's the potential of getting there. And the last step would be, but I think that's too much into the future, and it's not coming anyways. Yeah. Just to show it quickly, like my idea is that AI is gonna develop to an extent that's gonna be mind-blowing, and there might be safety issues, and we can't really estimate right now what those are. But I think if we as co-ops use the trust that we are building among our communities, and that's already been built by all these diversity of co-ops, I think we are a very good frame to create a safe way into the future, and not just safe in a existential risk perspective, but also safe in a way, in the terms of equality, social effects, and so on. Better for basically everyone. So this is a big chance, and we can work on this together. And I think it's also a big chance of putting the Principle 6 into practice and inter-cooperating and getting out of our silos and really putting our strengths together to build something big that serves us all and that protects us against the mechanisms that we're just now struggling against. Thank you.
I want to really talk on this topic because I think it's really important. I was telling one of the cooperators a while ago that sometimes platform cooperatives, it can be so lonely because you have to develop tech that's going to compete with big players many times who have a lot more money, who have billions of dollars, and you're trying to build a cooperative. So, but platform cooperative gives us a big chance to develop, not just vertically, but horizontally. Because now, vertically, of course, we can cut out the middleman, which is what takes a lot of money in the case of the Ubers and the Olas and so on. Someone was telling me a while ago, was asking me about Uber and Lyft, that they don't make a profit. So where is all the money going? Well, it's the driver's money from the driver's pockets that's actually going not to make Uber profitable, but to make the owners very rich. And this is a contradiction of capitalism itself, where you have companies failing, but the owners making a lot of money and the drivers going poor. And so this is just part of the reality that we face, but it's a problem that platform cooperatives can solve. Because the 25% Uber is taking, if we were able to take 10, 15 more can go to the drivers. So when we started, our proposition was we can give passengers 5% less and still give drivers more because this middleman is cut out. But to do that, we have to have technology, even if the technology is possible. It's the difference between the difference between being possible and being real is what platform cooperatives have to solve. And so we have this situation where a lot of our techs that came on, it's people that myself, my co-founder knew, and other people referred, but they're not really cooperative centered. That's one problem. Then you have to use, righteous software is basically three parts. You have onboarding of passengers and drivers. You have the engine in the middle that sends you to pick up the passenger from A to B. And then you have payment systems. But in all of these, we are not using any cooperative build systems. So onboarding, for instance, and by the way, there are millions of taxi drivers all over in the world. And they will use basically the same software. There is a little change in the UI because of because of laws. In New York City, they might say you have to do something specially, and some little difference in India. But these three basic sections, onboarding, the engine in the middle, and the payment system, is universal. So why can't we, as a consortium, develop a payment system? Why must I be paying Stripe? And so these are the kind of models that we have to fix. And that's how, so when you, and by the way, I don't think any of the principles need to be changed. The principles just have to be, I don't want to use the word enforced, but we have to make a commitment to make them real. I should not be struggling and having to go to private companies. And so when we build software, it's very difficult to give it to someone in Indonesia for free and open or for very low cost, as you mentioned. We should solve those problems in a practical way. And this will make us realize our great advantage of finishing away with the middleman. Because basically what we are doing is, instead of having Uber or Lyft in the middle taking 25 and 30% or whatever they feel, is to eliminate that so money can go back to the pockets of those who actually do the work.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to say that I think a very interesting common thread that's definitely emerged from all of these presentations is definitely one, of course, what can it mean to build this co-op tech in a more democratic way and also a more decentralized, co-owned way, of course, like we've been speaking through the day. And then, of course, some of these real questions that have also come in that, okay, we can think about it in a principled way, but how do we actually go about implementing that that democratic control, like Prerak mentioned, and also to make sure that those cooperative principles continue to have that responsibility towards co-op members. We have about 5 more minutes. Now I open it up to the audience. Can volunteers please help us with the mics?
Hi, my name is Dinesh. I wonder the million users and all the others, what is the interface? Because I don't know how many of them can read and write. So I don't know how you're managing with it. We for example, pair people when they can't when they can't read and write, right? So we are struggling with that, and I would like to know how you are dealing with it.
I think one important issue which one of the presenters said while dealing with the FPO's example of the farmers, that should the individual members be the part of that platform cooperative, or should be the institutional thing which he was mentioning like that. So I think that is a very important issue which needs to be deliberated, because I think in platform cooperatives, membership participation is very important, not institutional as he was telling. So maybe the speakers maybe they can throw light on this aspect.
So just to answer on the first question specifically, so in our experience, while we understand the digital literacy, the access, the maturity of using technology within the community is very low. That's why we have been always sort of relying on the frontline workers who can facilitate all of these transactions or the delivery of the services, right? That is something that has worked well for us. So that is one of the point of consideration that we have been having, is that should we consider them as a part of the process in terms of co-creating, because they understand the communities better as well, and they understand the collective institutions better as well, right? Because eventually they are the workers for the collective institutions. They have been employed by them to facilitate some of these services. So how do they become part of the process rather than communities directly interfacing with the product or the platform? Because that it's always going to be challenging, and specifically in the context of agriculture in India, and specifically for women as well, who do not have access to, let's say, basic phones as well eventually. So how do we sort of enable them to become part of this digital economy? So whether the frontline workers become the source or the medium through which we can facilitate all of this, is one of the things that we have been considering. But that is based on our experience in working with these farmers. On the second question, Prashant.
I'll just add a little bit to this and then move to the second question. So one of the concerns that came, so as Prerak said, I think for every 200 farmers, we have one user. So it's roughly like saying, can we find one person in a village who has a phone and is digitally literate and will associate themselves to a farmer collective? Right? But the question that also comes that will you then create another, will they become the middlemen, right? When they have the power in their hand. So what we do, so of course there are a lot of governance principles, a lot of settlement happens directly from the FPO into the farmer's bank account and so on and so forth. But one of the very nifty things we do is we are kind of preparing for the next wave of digital literacy in rural India. So every time a farmer is onboarded and a transaction is done by this frontline worker on their behalf, the moment a farmer is onboarded, we create an account for them. And we create something what we call a data wallet for them. And every time a transaction happens, whether somebody's bought seeds or somebody's sold something or done a processing or anything, that transaction is linked, is put into the data wallet of the farmer. And at any point in time, should they choose to become a user on the platform using their phone number, they get access to all the data history. We also have cases where a farmer may want to move away from one instance of the platform onto another instance for whatever reason. So there have been cases where a farmer sitting on a state government platform has said they want to move into a Vrutti instance. They just go ahead with it. The whole data gets ported with them in their data wallet. So we are preparing for giving the power of the data hand into the farmer, but that will be a digital literacy issue. On the second point, there's both the question of institution and the member. Right? So the institution is the core entity with which we work, but the way we try to build business rules in the platform is that if an institution uses the platform, it's difficult for them to compromise the member rights.
We are going to wrap up now, but I did want to throw this question out to Ken and Suroto and Felix as well, because I mean, if you have any thoughts on how you guys on your model are dealing with this question of how is the participation and maybe the rights of the individual members of a model like this can be protected or are being protected?
I think one thing you have to do is to try to remain a cooperative. Just try to remain a cooperative and believe in the principle. You have to be committed to this because there will be rough times when people will come by and tell you, if this was a private company, we could move faster. So you have to have commitment. When you looked at, there was some big study done on the 5 reasons that cooperative fail, and 3 of them were just basically business thing, finance, wrong people in the wrong places. But there were 2 very significant ones. And one was failure for the democratic principles. And the second was when the leadership become alienated from members. And those are 2 dangers that you have to fight every day. And so I think democracy also gives you strength. It's when you're developing software and you have people, users who actually feel ownership of it, they can tell you quickly when there's a problem is. Testing doesn't cost us anything. Testing costs over so much. So there's so much advantage in being with a cooperative, but we have to be committed and reinforce it.
I think for multi-stakeholder cooperatives, at least, it really makes sense to some extent to have different stakeholder types and different membership types. At Fairmondo, for example, we have employee membership, and employees have a special role because in our case, they appoint the so-called managing board. So they can at any point also remove the managing board. So there you have direct accountability to the employees. So it's kind of a worker co-op in that governance part, while users can become members, but they don't have that role. And maybe that, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think like you can design the cooperative also in a way that you prevent certain types of corruption of the cooperative principles.
That is all the time we have for this panel. Thank you very much to all the panelists.